Okay, so in the previous video, we've learned how to install JavaScript, Node.js, run some program, and write them. And we learned a few commands. Now, there are things that you can do with JavaScript. For example, we're going to take a look at a few of those examples. One of them is called reading a file. You can read from a file on the server, okay? And then you can write to a file if you want, okay? So now I'm going to show you this example. Is important example because you need to be familiar with some of these things called callbacks. Okay, what is a callback? First, there are things here called require. Now, in Node.js and JavaScript, require here means that it's, if you've used Java or C#, requires same as import. So in this line, I'm saying import what? The file system library. So it allow me to do read and write to it. So in this first part, we have a file called test.txt. Here's my file called text.txt. It has some data in it. Here I will say read my file, okay? When you read a file, this is, you define a function, what we call this function callback. When you attempt to do an asynchronous call, usually it takes time. It means that you issue a command, it goes off, and when it's done, it comes back to you. So what we are doing here, it says, okay, I want you to read this file, but when I'm done, I want you to call this back. This is in Swift, it's called completion handler, which means that when it's done, do the following. What are my options? This function would receive either two parameters, either error or data, or maybe both sometimes. But if we have an error, I print out the error. Else, I print out the content of the file that I just read. When I'm done with this, I simply print this message, say, after callback. This is the first example. So this is how you read from a file, okay? Now I will put these links for you to download to mess with them and test them. I'll put them a link in the YouTube, okay, at one point. The other part that you have here is that you have a file that you can actually do some writing to it. So here I have a file called file1.txt, and it says fs.write file output, and then the name of the file, and then because I said required, right? So I have the required file system. So file system, write some data that we want to write. Again, when I'm done, it will, when it's done writing, there possibly could be an error. If there is an error, I will say print out the error. Otherwise, if there is no error, we say the file got created, and then console log, we are done. So if I want to run this file, it's called reading.js. So if I type in reading node.reading.js, what will happen? It create. Okay, here is the data from that file. After callback, it's when it's done calling back, here is my data from the file. It read the data from the file, and it created a file, and it wrote in it some data. So if I open that file one, it will have some, here it is, file1.txt, it will have some data in it, okay? It is that data from there. So this example shows you how we do read and write using what? Using JavaScript and Node.js. Okay, I'm gonna stop at this example, and then I'll show you another example later on. Okay, the next example show you how we read JSON data, and we talk about what is JSON. These are important topics. Okay.